This is question 1 for our calculus review for our first test. A tank holds 3,000 gallons of water, which drains from the bottom of the tank in half an hour. The values in this table show the volume V of water remaining in the tank in gallons after T minutes. We have for 5 minutes, 2,064 gallons, 10 minutes, 1,323 gallons, 15 minutes, 765 gallons, 20 minutes, 339 gallons, 25 minutes, 78 gallons, and 30 minutes would be 0 gallons. If the point P is the point 15, 765 on the graph of V, we want the slopes of the secant lines, PQ, where Q is the point on the graph, with T being 5, 10, 20, 25, and 30. Rounding these to 1 decimal places. And then we want to estimate the slope of this tangent line at P by averaging these slopes of the 2 adjacent secant lines, corresponding to 2 points closest to P, again rounding this to 1 decimal place. So let's start off with A, right? A. So we know P here is this point 15, 765. Let me highlight that for reference sake. So I'm going to kind of redraw this a little bit just so we can have it for reference as we're doing our slopes. I'd say that's about big enough. Our first point was 5, 2,064. So for the slope of that line PQ, based on what we have, we are going to have the 2,064 minus 765 divided by, this would be 5 minus 15 from up here. This would give us a slope of negative 129.9. Likewise, for the point 10, 1,323, this would be 1,323 minus 765 divided by 10 minus 15. That makes negative 111.6. For the point 20, 339. This would make 339 minus 765, all divided by 20 minus 15. And for that particular value, once we put that into our calculator, the value that we would get for that is going to be a value of negative 85.2. Based on that particular point. And then we have those last 2 ones to do as well. And I need more room. The last 2 would be, this is 25, 78. This would be 78 minus 765 divided by, this would be 25 minus 15. That makes negative 68.7. And then the last one would be 30, 0, and 0 minus 765 divided by 30 minus 15. And this makes negative 51.0. For part B, we want to average those 2 points. So for us to do this, this would, since our point P is at 15, 765, averaging the 2 points, that'll be based on, from a table up here, 10 and 20. So this would be based on the slopes that we had found. So that would be based on here and here, as opposed to the table. So let me get rid of that just to not confuse. They'll be based on the table since we want to estimate the slope. So in this case, we're going to average these two numbers. Negative 111.6 plus negative 85.2 divided by 2. Doing so gives us an estimated slope of negative 98.4. Thank you.